If you grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons, you probably remember Looney Tunes, the slapstick antics of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and the rest of the gang. The show was a staple of childhood for generations, with its wild chases, clever jokes, and iconic catchphrases. But there's a story that's been whispered about in animation circles for decades. A story that never made it to TV. Fans and animators call it the Forgotten Frame. And those who claim to know the truth say it's the one piece of Looney Tunes history that was never meant to be found. I first heard about it from a retired animator who worked at Warner Bros. In the 1970s. He told me that the studio archives were full of oddities, unfinished shorts, test reels, and scenes that were cut for being too strange or unsettling. But the strangest of all was a single film canister, unmarked except for a piece of masking tape with the words, "Do not project," scrawled in faded ink. According to him, the canister sat untouched on a shelf for years, gathering dust, until one day a curious intern decided to take a look. The film inside was only a few minutes long, and at first, it looked like any other Looney Tunes short. Bugs Bunny was wandering through a forest, munching on a carrot, when he stumbled upon a strange, abandoned house. The animation was a little rougher than usual, the colors slightly off, but at first, it just felt like an early draft. Bugs knocked on the door, made a few wisecracks, and stepped inside. But as the short went on, things started to feel wrong. The house was empty, the furniture covered in sheets, and the only sound was the echo of Bugs' footsteps. The background music faded, replaced by a low, unsettling hum. Bugs called out for anyone home, but his voice sounded distant, almost muffled. He wandered from room to room, each one darker than the last, the shadows growing longer and the colors more washed out. Eventually, Bugs found himself in a hallway lined with old, cracked mirrors. He looked into one, and for a split second, his reflection didn't move. Instead, it stared back at him with wide, empty eyes. Bugs blinked, and the reflection snapped back to normal, but the moment lingered. He tried to leave, but every door led back to the same hallway, the mirrors multiplying with each turn. The short ended with Bugs standing in front of a mirror, his reflection slowly turning away from him and walking into the darkness. The screen faded to black, and for a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, a single frame flashed on the screen. A distorted image of Bugs's face, twisted in fear, his eyes wide and pleading. The screen stayed black for a few seconds after that final, twisted frame. Then, the film abruptly cut to the familiar "That's all, folks" end card, but even that looked wrong. The colors were faded, the music was warped and slow, and Porky Pig's voice stuttered and echoed, as if the tape was damaged. The intern who watched it said he felt a chill run down his spine, and for days afterward, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from the shadows. Word spread quickly through the studio. Some animators laughed it off as a prank, a bit of dark humor from the early days of animation, but others were genuinely unsettled. A few people tried to watch the film again, but the projector would jam, or the reel would snap, as if the film itself didn't want to be seen. Eventually, the canister was locked away in a back room, and the story faded into legend. But the rumors didn't stop. Over the years, people claimed to have seen copies of The Forgotten Frame at animation conventions, or to have found stills from the short hidden in old studio archives. Some described seeing Bugs Bunny's reflection move on its own, or hearing whispers in the background of the film. Others said that if you paused the tape at just the right moment, you could see other characters, Daffy, Elmer, even Tweety, standing in the shadows of the hallway, their faces blank and their eyes wide. I started searching for proof of the short clips, screenshots, anything. But every time I got close, the trail went cold. Lost media forums are filled with people trading stories and theories, but no one has ever produced a full recording. Some claim to have found old film reels at estate sales or in forgotten studio basements, but the footage is always corrupted, the audio warped, and filled with static. Others say the short is cursed, that anyone who watches it is plagued by nightmares of endless hallways and mirrors that don't show your own reflection. After hearing so many stories, I started to wonder if the forgotten frame was more than just a lost cartoon. Maybe it was a kind of warning, a reminder that even the most beloved shows have their secrets. Or maybe it was just a story that got out of control, spreading from one animator to the next, growing darker and more twisted with every retelling. Now, whenever I see a Looney Tunes rerun, I feel a little uneasy. I remember the stories, the image of Bugs's reflection turning away, the whispers about the missing frame. And I wonder if the short is still out there, waiting for someone new to find it. I kept searching, hoping to find someone who could confirm the story, or at least explain where it came from. I messaged old animators, scoured fan forums, and even reached out to people who claimed to have worked at Warner Brothers in the golden age of animation. Most never replied, or just laughed off my questions. But every so often, someone would share a detail that matched what I'd heard. A mention of the cold air in the archive room, the way the film canister seemed heavier than it should be, or the feeling that the mirrors in the short were watching you, not the other way around. One night I got an anonymous email. The subject line was blank, and the message was short. Some frames are better left forgotten. Attached was a single image, a blurry screenshot of Bugs standing in the hallway of mirrors. His reflection turned away, the shadows behind him filled with faint outlines of other characters. The quality was terrible, but I recognized the scene from the stories. If you looked closely, you could just make out Daffy's beak and Elmer's hat, their faces pale and eyes wide. I stared at the image for a long time, feeling a chill run down my spine. Was it real or just a clever fake? I couldn't tell, but I saved it anyway. After that, the dreams started. I'd find myself wandering through endless hallways lined with mirrors, my own reflection lagging behind or moving ahead, never quite matching my movements. Sometimes I'd see Bugs in the glass, his face twisted in fear, his eyes pleading for help. Other times, I'd see other Looney Tunes characters in the shadows, their faces blank, their voices echoing in a language I couldn't understand. I'd wake up sweating, the sound of static still ringing in my ears. I stopped searching for the short after that. Every time I thought about it, I'd feel a wave of unease, as if something was warning me to leave it alone. But the story kept spreading. More people posted about their own experiences, strange dreams, corrupted files, TVs turning on by themselves late at night, always to a screen filled with static and the faint sound of cartoon laughter. Some fans started to believe that the forgotten frame wasn't just a lost cartoon, but a kind of curse, a story that infects anyone who hears about it, making them see things that aren't there, dream things they can't explain. Others said it was a metaphor for the secrets every studio keeps, the mistakes and experiments that never see the light of day. But no one could explain the details that kept cropping up. The mirrors, the cold air, the sense that something was watching from the shadows. Now, whenever I see a Looney Tunes rerun, I feel a little uneasy. I remember the stories, the image in that email, the dreams that still haunt me. And I wonder if the short is still out there, waiting for someone new to find it. I wish I could say the nightmares faded, that the story of the forgotten frame eventually became just another creepy internet rumor. But the truth is, it's always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet room, I'll hear the faint hum of static, or the echo of Bugs Bunny's voice, warped and distant, saying, "Hey, what's up, Doc?" I'll turn on the TV late at night and find the screen flickering, and for a split second, I'll see a hallway of mirrors, or a reflection that doesn't quite match my own. I've learned to live with it, in a way. I don't talk about the short anymore, and I avoid anything to do with lost media. But every so often, someone will bring it up, a friend, a stranger online, even a random post on social media. The details are always the same. The lost short, the mirrors, the cold air, the sense that something is watching from the shadows. And every time, I feel that old fear creeping back in, cold and sharp as the sound of a film reel spinning in the dark. Some people say the short is still out there, hidden on an old film reel in someone's attic, or buried deep in the archives of a forgotten studio. Others believe it's just a story, a cautionary tale about the things we're not supposed to see. But those of us who've heard the stories, who've seen the images, or had the dreams, know better. We know that some secrets have a way of sticking with you, of changing the way you see the world. Now, whenever I see Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck on TV, I hesitate before watching. I remember the mirrors, the static, the way Bugs's eyes seem to plead for help. I wonder if the short is still waiting for someone new to find it, someone new to carry the story forward. And I wonder if, somewhere out there, Bugs is still trapped in that endless hallway, his reflection turned away, calling out for help that never comes. So if you ever hear about the forgotten frame, or find yourself tempted to search for lost episodes late at night, remember my story. Some things are better left lost. Some frames are better left unprojected. And some secrets, no matter how curious you are better left forgotten. Because once you've seen the reflection turn away, once you've heard the static in the dark, you'll never look at Looney Tunes or your own reflection the same way again. I still get messages from people who stumble across the legend for the first time. They always start the same way. Curiosity, a little skepticism, maybe even a joke about how a cartoon could be so unsettling. But after a while, the tone changes. They ask if I've ever really seen the short, if the dreams ever stop, if the feeling of being watched ever goes away. I never know what to tell them. I want to say it's all just a story, that it can't hurt you if you don't believe in it. But I know better. Sometimes I wonder if the forgotten frame is more than just a lost piece of animation. Maybe it's a kind of test, a way to see who's willing to look too closely, to dig too deep. And if you ever see Bugs Bunny standing in a hallway of mirrors, his reflection turning away, the shadows closing in behind him, turn off the TV, walk away, don't look back. Because in the forgotten frame, the real nightmare isn't what you see on the screen. It's what follows you when the episode ends. I wish I could say there's a way to break the spell, to shake off the feeling that the forgotten frame leaves behind. But the truth is, once you know the story, it's hard to forget. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the flicker of a screen, in the uneasy silence that settles just before you fall asleep. I've learned to live with it, to keep my distance from old cartoons and lost media. But the memory is always there, waiting. Sometimes I'll catch myself glancing at the TV, half expecting to see Bugs's eyes staring back at me from the static. Other times, I'll hear a faint hum, like the one that filled the background of that short, and I'll freeze, heart pounding, until I convince myself it's just the refrigerator or the pipes in the wall. But deep down, I know better. I know that some stories have a way of reaching out, of finding you no matter how far you run. I've talked to others who feel the same. Some have tried to track down the short, convinced that if they can just see it for themselves, the mystery will finally make sense. But every time, the trail goes cold. The files are corrupted. The reels are blank. The links disappear as soon as you click them. It's as if the short doesn't want to be found. Or maybe as if it's waiting for the right person to find it. So if you ever hear about the forgotten frame, or if you find yourself drawn to stories about lost episodes and hidden secrets, remember this: curiosity can be dangerous. Some things are better left alone, no matter how tempting they seem. And if you ever see a flash of static and a pair of wide, pleading eyes in the corner of your screen, don't look too closely. Don't listen to the hum. Don't try to remember the details. Because some episodes aren't just stories. Some frames are warnings, and some nightmares, once they find you, never really let you go. So turn off the TV, close your laptop, and let the story fade. Trust me, there are some secrets you don't want to uncover, and the forgotten frame is one of them.